So just as I've mentioned previously, I think the fact that we're doing so many recitations of the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer is also, of course, we're doing for the removal of the obstacles to the health of our precious teacher, Kyelje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as advised by Candrela, but it's also an opportunity for us to familiarize with this more and more. And some of us very courageously turned up last Saturday for the first session with Gen Kunchok on, well, it says Tibetan chanting. We didn't do any chanting, by the way, just to say. What it was learning the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer in the Tibetan script. When I say learning it, at least being shown an explanation. So it's really wonderful. I have found in all my past times of going along to beginner Tibetan classes, because I never get past beginner. So that you learn a sort of richness about what it all means, you know, in you know, sort of a different interpretation and so forth, and unpacking each syllable, you know. So it's really very, very lovely. So I just encourage other people to turn up. Now, I don't get past beginner level and I just go, oh, it's imprints, you know, sometime in the future, who knows when, something will click. So I'm not being a very good student, so I'm not being a very good example, but I turn up, you know, and just enjoy the process. And Genlas are very, very patient with us and, you know, accommodating. So just it's 11:30 till 12:30 on Saturdays. I think Saturdays when I'm in town. I don't know why, maybe to make up the numbers. So just welcome other people to come along and, you know, share the experience. I just think whatever I don't understand, which is most things, I just think just let it soak in. It'll go in there somewhere, you know, so you can just feel that. And I'll say that in relation to what we're exploring here in this Exploring Buddhism, Exploring the Mind. So we have been looking at over the, you know, like last week, we're looking at the sort of general, we talk about mental factors that support the mind to function. Particularly last week, we started looking at the omnipresent mental factor. So we'll continue on with this today, and please at any time, questions, comments, clarification is all welcome. So last time we looked at the different omnipresent mental factors of feeling, discrimination, intention. So this is part of a classic presentation. So that's why I encourage questions, because the important thing is that we get some sense of being able to connect it to our own personal experience, examples, and so forth. That's, yeah. So feel free to share any of those. So continuing on, so when it says omnipresent mental factors, we're talking about we need all of these to come together for the mind to function fully. And as I was saying last week, we never realize how much is going on there simultaneously, because it all just happens all together at once. But we unpack it to look at, well, what are these things that are happening all together all at once? So it's being like a scientist of the mind, you know, where they break down. A friend, I haven't watched it yet, but she sent last night a video. It was, I think, a TED talk of the stages of birth broken down into, I mean, it doesn't go through 9 months. It's not 9 months long, the video. It's only a few minutes, but it goes into slow-mo of various times of development. And she's saying, like, the heart just starts with these 2 drops, you know, or yeah. So it's quite interesting, because we were looking at how would we map that against a Buddhist presentation and things like that. So I'll enjoy, she sent 2 videos, so I'll enjoy watching those because they're short. So I'm more likely to watch them. But this is what we do here, is break down all these moments of functioning of the mind to understand what's going on here. The actual factors themselves you'll be familiar with. You know that we use these words, they're not something esoteric. So the next one that we're looking at is attention or mental engagement, which is like gathering together all the energy of attention onto whatever it is we're focusing on, whether we're doing that in meditation or just like now I'm attending to all of you. And so that sort of mental engagement that, you know, harnesses all that energy and directs the primary consciousness. When we say primary consciousness, it could be a sense consciousness. So it could be the I. When I'm attending to each one of you, we can say the I, you know, I sense consciousness that sees, and all the mental factors that come along with that, and actually apprehend the object. So when I say I'm attending to each one of you, I'm recognizing, if you like, each one of you at the same time. And it focuses and holds the mind on the object, without allowing it to move elsewhere. And I like this whole idea of holding the mind on the object, because attention has also this sense of tending to, caring for, you know, attending to. So holding the mind on the object without allowing it to move elsewhere. So when that actually, we're in that experience of someone fully attending to us, fully attending without inattentive awareness, that's the opposite, inattentive awareness. Inattentive awareness, yes, yes, I'm listening to you. Yeah, 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 keep going, I'm listening. That's an inattentive awareness, isn't it? You know, because I'm engaged in all other things, but weakly I'm attending, but not very well. And actually, a friend of mine said that, you know, when she was talking to a friend on the phone and they started going, yes, 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 she'd throw in some outrageous comment just to see if they were fully attending. And usually the answer was no. Then it's like, you're not paying attention to me, are you? So we know the absence of attention, just like, you know, these days, ADHD has become a very, well, shall we say, fairly tragically commonplace condition. Or as Alan Wallace likes to say, ADDD, attentional deficit delusional disorder. Not only are we not paying attention, we're totally deluded. You know, he is saying that as a Buddhist teacher, which is an extra thing on top. But when you have somebody has your full attention, you feel a sense of appreciation and respect. You feel heard. You feel listened to. Right? I can think of a very potent example for me when in New Zealand at Mahamudra Centre, and Venerable Roger, Lama Zopa Rinpoche was teaching there, and the day that Venerable Roger came and told me when I was going to be ordained. Like, I'd gone to New Zealand knowing sometime in that trip the ordination was going to happen. So, of course, I was paying full attention because this was the most important years of my life. But the attention of Venerable Roger, who's a very, very busy man, CEO of our organisation, Lama Zopa's attendant, and that sense of, no matter how busy, of giving that fullest attention, you know, and then talking to me, and then as I went to walk away, full attention to the insect on the ground to make sure I didn't tread on it, you know, watch out for that insect. So that sort of power of attention is what we're talking about here, and gathering all that attention onto whatever we're attending to, you know. Okay. So that's the one of attention or mental engagement. How, well, actually, not how, the fact that we do engage with an object of, you know, things we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, so forth. And then we talk about the next one is contact with the object. When I say next one, these 5 all happen simultaneously, just the next one in the presentation. So it connects the object, the sense power, so the object, and say all you people, the I sense power, and the cognitive faculty of the mind, recognizing, oh yes, recognizing who you are and so forth. And it's that becomes then the basis for feelings of pleasure, pain, indifference, or disregard, regardless, so if it's a feeling of pleasure, it's something we like and we want more of, displeasure or aversion, some discomfort. And it's quite sensible to have that because, if we're having aches and pains, we want to attend to that. But we're doing this in relation to everything all the time, even at a very subtle level, not aware of that. And this sense of indifference, or it may not even be indifference, just neutrality, it's not in my view, it's neither here nor there. So this cause of feeling. And earlier when we were looking at the 12 links, or when you look at the 12 links of dependent origination, I keep looking at that wall thinking it's going to manifest there magically, but of course we have to put some work into making that wheel of life happen on that wall, as advice. Anyway, we'll keep putting it out there. So this is link number 6, and you see contact and then feeling. So you can relate this to how that is presented in the 12 links. So just a reminder that all of these 5 come together. It's not one after the other, right? Okay. So that's the 5 omnipresent mental factors. And then just to reiterate, and it's from a quote from Kachin Yeshe Gyaltsen, who was the tutor of the 8th Dalai Lama. He said, if any of the 5 omnipresent factors are missing, the experience of the object will not be complete. Like I said, if I've got inattentive awareness, then we'll actually look at things like inattentive awareness when we look at the 7 factors of awareness, 7 types of awareness subsequently to come, preview. So they have to all be there. So if there's no feeling, there's going to be no experience, is there? Because our experiences are fit into either one of those categories of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, or equanimous would be a nice word to use. And if there's no discrimination or recognition of the object, we're not going to apprehend the object's unique marks. So when we say unique marks, so take a cup, a flat-bottomed, well, let me say mug, a flat-bottomed vessel with a handle, that's what it is, handle, suitable for holding water. Okay, thank you very much. On a horn. So I can't recognize or distinguish it as cup rather than table or anything else if there's no discrimination, that recognizes the unique features of that. And if there's no intention, we said intention moves the mind towards the object, then the mind won't go towards the object. And if there's no attention, the mind won't be focused. It won't take it in, will it? Yeah. Okay, something's funny happening here on the computer. Okay. I get these pop-ups that I don't want to have. Okay, that's better. And if there's just on intention or motivation, we were talking about this last week, that usually it's probably at a very, very subtle level. Like I used a gross or manifest example of intending to go to the door, but even intending to go to the door, intending to leave the center. And, you know, there's all these intentions, get up, walk, you know, but I'm not aware of all of that. You know, I'm probably not even, I might be, oh, I think I'll go now. I mean, I might be aware of that one, but it's time to go or whatever. But all the intentions in each single moment that go along, I'm not aware of. So it can be at a very subtle basis. And then if there's no contact with the object, there's no basis for feeling and all these others, because I haven't contacted the object. My eye hasn't seen it. There could be a lot of objects that we don't see. I remember I used to go bushwalking with a friend of mine who had very fine eye for detail. He still has pretty fine eye for detail, but he's getting older. He's one of these people who you gave your socks to do invisible darning. It's very good. I was so disappointed when he wasn't able to do invisible darning anymore. Anyway, now we just throw them out, isn't it? We don't do the darning. Anyway, so we'd go bushwalking and he'd say, you know, you didn't even notice the bush orchids. No, they're tiny, right? Oh, I didn't even notice the bush. So I didn't make contact with the bush orchid. What bush orchid? So I didn't get to appreciate that because I didn't see it. Just as example, right? So just example. So for the full experience of the object, we've got to have all these factors coming together. Okay. So that's the omnipresent mental factors, 5 of them. And we move on from there to what's called the object ascertaining mental factors. Sometimes when you hear these terms, you go, what? Because it's not the way we normally speak, but you get familiar with the terminology. They're called object ascertaining because it's how they engage with the object, how they apprehend the individual features of the object. So this brings in a sense of some factors of qualities, if you like. And generally in our Buddhist presentation, I mean, they can be virtuous or non-virtuous or neutral, but in our Buddhist presentation, we look at these, another 5, as being virtuous. We're focusing on the virtuous mental factors. We're focusing on developing constructive, positive emotions and so forth. Okay, so we have these 5: aspiration, belief, mindfulness, meditative concentration, and wisdom. So we're familiar at least with some of these because we go through them, we talk about them a lot, particularly meditative concentration and wisdom and so forth. So Geshe Tashi in the Buddhist psychology, as part of the previous Foundation of Buddhist Thought course, said if the first group, so the omnipresent mental factors, are like the machine, it's like the engine of the mind, it's like how the mind's going to function, the mechanics, the bare mechanics of the mind, then this group, object ascertaining, is shaping the mind's experience, how we experience everything we engage with, whether it's people or cups or computers or anything. So for example, coming here today, just walking from next door, not very far, and the sun's out, and I always, and when it's, you know, sort of when the sun comes out like this, particularly when it's been raining and overcast, I'm like, oh, another glorious day in samsara. I have to remind myself of the samsara bit because, you know, I'm more hooked into the glorious day. So that's how I ascertain the sunny day is, oh, what a glorious sunny day. Okay. So how these 5 objects ascertain that, or factors, sorry, ascertain that object of the main mind, cup to my eye, sense consciousness, taking the clay of the raw sense data, so that eye sees what? Shape and color, and molding it into the finished sculpture. So we can say that in one way, this is the stories that we create, the elaborations that we create. But even without a story on top, you know, engaging the object, I then engage, I sense consciousness, say cup. And then as soon as I label cup, I've got a generic image of cup. Now the cup itself is impermanent, changing moment to moment. And we don't, the eye consciousness doesn't ascertain that. That's too subtle for the eye consciousness. It doesn't see the impermanence of cup. But that generic image, that image of cup, is something permanent, you know, because I create this image in my mind, cup. So I could equally say to you, you know, we all have an image of car. As soon as someone says car, an image pops in your mind, right? Of car. It may not be a particular brand or a particular, just sort of some generic, even those little just, you know, icon type things, something pops into our mind. So here's a little experiment. So if I say the word farmer, what image pops to your mind? Anyone?
He's got a hat.
He's got a hat. He's got a hat. He's got boots. He's got a big moustache. He's got a pitchfork. He's a hard worker. So I'm hearing he. Now, I use that example because I previously worked in an aid agency where my boss would ask people this in training programs and say, you know, 80% of farmers in Africa are female. And I don't know about in Western Australia how many are female, I haven't checked. But that we have this image, right? Now that image can change given new information. It is a fixed permanent image, but it doesn't mean we don't next moment, new information, have another fixed permanent image, right? If you get what I mean. It doesn't mean I'll only ever think of farmer like with hat and moustache and pitchfork and whatever. Interesting. I can now draw a farmer. Okay. So how close that image, that ascertained object is to reality depends on how deluded or how enlightened the mind is, the ascertaining mind. Okay. And the Buddha would say, well, we're all in samsara, there's going to be some element of delusion. In other words, as ordinary beings, if we talk about samsara, as ordinary beings, because there's nonetheless, no matter how much our ideas might be in sync with reality about certain things, there's always that sort of pervasive ignorance of self-grasping. So there's always some pollution there or some, yeah, just something. Could be a lot, could be a little, depending how enlightened or not we are, how deluded we are. On any particular thing, you know, we might be closer to reality in a lot of things and then totally ignorant in a lot of other things, or totally mistaken in a lot of other things. Okay, so unpacking these a little bit further, so that, as I said, they're not of themselves virtuous, but they become virtuous when we associate it with a virtuous mental state. So as Dharma practitioners and Dharma students, that's what we're doing. That's what we're interested in, is associating them with virtuous, positive states of mind so we can harness their energy for our study, practice, reflection on our spiritual path. Okay. So the first one, aspiration. So aspiration, all our prayers are aspirations. Every single prayer is an aspiration. You know, when you take refuge, and I have to remind folks, there's a refuge ceremony coming up on the 10th of July in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon, 10th of July, 2 to 4 here. Just letting you know, if you know anyone who's interested or people who want to renew or just come along or whatever. Let's celebrate those taking refuge. Okay, so when we say that refuge prayer and so forth, you're taking a strong interest in the object as a basis of joyous effort. So here, basis of joyous effort in the context of our spiritual practice, something to energize us, enthuse us into practice and so forth. So this is this one of aspiration. So we talk about having aspiring faith on the basis of the object of, say, the Buddha, finding out something about the Buddha, admiring that, and then this factor of aspiration takes that a bit further and saying, oh, well, if the Buddha said I can become like that, that's what I want. I aspire to become like that. I inspire to become in line. We say it in our prayers all the time. And then we say part of our aspiration for that in a Mahayana context is aspiring to become like that. Why? To benefit others. Or so you become a Buddha and then your job begins. But actually it's a job all along the way. You have to benefit others to get to that point. Otherwise you'll never get to that point. So it's a two-way process, isn't it? Okay. And then the next one, appreciation or conviction or belief. So this is a much stronger sense of faith. It stabilizes that apprehension of that previously ascertained object. In other words, the Buddha, using that example, I'm saying, and holds it so it's not distracted by another view. So this is what we do when we take refuge and go, no, I've checked out the Buddha's teachings. I'm convinced of the Buddha's teachings. I'm not going to be swayed from that no matter what anyone says. It doesn't mean we go out and proselytize and try and get everybody else to sign up for the club, although it is said to encourage people to take refuge. But when I first started visiting prisons, Cessnock prison in New South Wales, and this one guy who was the first person I visited, but then, pretty soon a group was happening, and one day he said, oh, I brought along the whole wing. And I'm like, do they want to be here? Because we don't work like that. We're not trying to make everyone come along. I said, oh no, they all want to be here. So we have to be very careful, that, but we ourselves, and that's why they say being a Buddhist is being an inner being is changing ourselves on the inside. But we won't be distracted by another view, like in the Guru Puja. We had Guru Puja here last night. I love that line, immutable like a Vajra. So the Vajra here, please help me out. Is there one there? Double Vajra on here? Oh, there, over here. I knew it was here somewhere because I've referred to it before. So each one of those bits of the cross, Vajra is like, said to be like swift as lightning, diamond cutter, very strong. So very sharp, very strong, but immutable like a Vajra. Immutable meaning unable to be changed. So we can, this is this mind of immutability, an immutable mind. Okay, so that you're unswayed, that you have conviction based on having checked out the Buddha's teachings and the validity of the law of cause and effect, of karma, of the Four Noble Truths, and so forth. To whatever extent we understand that, we say yes, they are truths actually, because we've checked that out. Not just because the Buddha said so. Okay. And then the next one, mindfulness, one we talk about a lot. And so there can be as many definitions of mindfulness as I think there are people in the world. But in the Buddhist context, what we're looking at is repeatedly bringing to mind, it says a phenomena of previous acquaintance. In other words, take cup, a previous moment of cup. So my acquaintance from the previous moment to now, and without forgetting it. So not allowing the mind to be distracted from the object, from cup. And that's the basis becomes that mindfulness becomes the basis for developing concentration. Because, you know, I'm going to mindfully, you know, attend to cup. And of course, a second later, my mind gets bored with that. So I want to attend to something else. See, the mind of aversion goes, yeah, cup. I know it changes, but I can't see it changing. So what's next? So we want, you know, we want stimulation, isn't it? The mind wants stimulation. So, of course, we do that in meditation, but not just while in meditation, cultivating this sense of mindfulness, of not forgetfulness. And this is where it does link into the idea of present, you know, being present in the now, although that's not the Buddhist definition. At our first Mind and its Potential conference in Sydney in 2005, Geshe Dawa said, if you want to become enlightened, practice mindfulness. So it can be a sort of simple instruction, really. Oh, okay, practice mindfulness. So I heard that and very enthusiastically the next morning. I don't know what I did until then. But the next morning when I got up, I thought, right, I'm going to keep my mind present in the here and now, present. And I think about 15 minutes later, my mind was downstairs making breakfast while I was still present in the room upstairs, you know, in the bedroom. But it's training. We train our mind. Yes, Venerable Yangshin, sorry.
When I was at the mental health first aid course this week, the teacher was a psychologist, and she was saying in terms of mental wellness, mindfulness is one of them.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, mental wellness, mindfulness. Of course, did you ask her what she meant by mindfulness?
Not what we mean.
No, but it's good to ask, because here I've got a quote from a Thai professor in Buddhism. No, sorry, not in Buddhism, in business. Okay, he's a Thai professor, and introducing mindfulness into workplaces. So he is exactly talking about, to some extent, that sense of well-being. Mindfulness can help us develop emotional intelligence. So we have all these terminologies these days that weren't being looked at previously, but the whole importance now, particularly through positive psychology and so forth, emotional intelligence, by increasing people's understandings of their own emotions. That's all of what the Buddha taught. That's the whole of the Buddha Dharma, is familiarizing with what's going on in our minds. Since the practice of mindfulness involves noticing one's current thoughts and feelings without judgment. So this is the sort of definition that John Kabat-Zinn, for example, has made very common in the world. You know, without judgment or interference, you learn to observe different emotional states. Observe different emotional states. So here we say, not conflating with those, not cognitively fusing with those, so not getting caught up in them. But this is what we do often in our meditation, isn't it? Take that step back and observe. And we use different analogies. Like last week, we were talking about, you know, using the projections on a movie screen, but not engaging with that, which is, well, what's the point? I paid my money to watch the movie. And they made the movie so very much that I would get caught up in it. But we're not talking about, you know, paying your money and going off. You can just watch the movies in your own mind, take a step back, entirely free, but not engage with that whole emotional play that's going on. And so using different analogies like that, or we talk about sitting on the bank of the stream of consciousness, and we use all sorts of different analogies for the you know, fast flowing, cascading, the meandering, the billabongs, the whatever of our stream of consciousness. And also, what else? Clouds in the sky. We use these different analogies. It's not that you know, the mind is that, but we're trying to get some sense of that experience, that sense of observation. Yeah.
When you say mindfulness is of the previous, does that mean we can't be mindful of novel phenomena?
Yes, we can be mindful of novel phenomenon. Well, you could say in one way, no, but you could say you have to have ascertained the object, right? And then hold with mindfulness. So that's why it could be either way, depending on what we mean by novel. Of course, we're engaging with new things all the time, aren't we?
So I was thinking that everything is novel in some sense.
Yeah, it's a new moment. Yeah.
So therefore, does it mean we can't be just trying to figure out the difference between ascertaining or something familiar, previous?
Well, when we say previous, you can say previous moment, that you've engaged the object and then apply mindfulness to that. So the previous, it can be very, very imperceptible. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So in a classic Vipassana presentation, say in particularly focused on in the Theravadan tradition, where we talk about the 4 close applications of mindfulness, 4 near placements of mindfulness to the body, to feeling, to the mind, and to phenomena, is saying, you know, we're turning that mindfulness inwards and looking at, well, what's going on here? What's going on with sensations in my body? You know, why, in terms of feelings, why am I responding in this way? Noticing even that all the time, just on the basis of sensations in the body, we're judging or we're responding, maybe not judging, but responding to going towards the pleasant, going away from the other pleasant, and the rest we don't even register. But just even that awareness of knowing that we're doing that all the time is, I find, quite profound, just on the basis of sensation in the body. I'm not talking about how, you know, emotions or anything else at this point, but then we look deeper into the mind, how the mind engages that, you know, why am I reacting in this way? What's, you know, what's underlying this, and so forth. And then we investigate phenomena. Just means usually when we talk about phenomena in the applications of mindfulness, we're talking about the rest of the aggregates, which is all these mental factors and so forth. So what's going on here? And then Charan Sukbum Mongol, he's got a long name. Sorry, I probably pronounced it wrong. Thai name. Mindfulness is positively correlated with increased clarity, right? So we have increased clarity of the feelings we've investigated, attention to the feelings, and lower distractions. So here comes our ADHD mind. Is that a hand up? I was just beautiful mudra. Not sure what it's going from there.
I haven't learned about those yet. It's just with mindfulness, when you come from this Western understanding, and when you have understanding the Western concept of mindfulness, have understanding Buddha's concept of mindfulness, it always seems like there's a bit missing in the Western concept.
Exactly.
Because we're looking, I feel, with my limited understanding, that we're looking at developing this sort of knowing in order to develop self-compassion to help with mental health. So, you know, depression, anxiety, there's often an element of lack of self-compassion, self-judgment, and we're using that to increase people's mental health, but we're not really looking at the transformative part of mindfulness, like transforming negative emotions.
Well, actually, what you're describing, so looking at mindfulness in a Western say, psychology application, where it's looking at things like managing anxiety, depression, and enhancing people's mental health. So anything that is enhancing mental health, giving a sense of well-being, is focusing on the positive, because it could only be that, right? Even though the words may not be used, the concepts may not be used, and that's an important thing to be aware of. I think more in positive psychology it's happening, but even though when we talk about emotional intelligence, that's what it is, isn't it? And so it's being able to, it doesn't go as, you're correct, it doesn't go as in depth as the Buddhist presentation, but it's not contradictory. And so the reason that it works is because it's tending towards the positive. Like to someone who's depressed, you don't say, oh, get over it, get up out of bed or whatever. You say, now take care, that one needs to be taken care of, and, you know, whatever else you say that's supportive of, not indulge the depression, but quit the self-judgment, as you said, develop self-compassion, you know. And that's there in the Buddhist teaching too, very much, you know, self-compassion before compassion for others. So depending where the person's at, you know, that's what's needed at that time. But to have a sense of well-being, it is tapping into that positivity within ourselves, which is there. We would say it's innately there. I don't know if psychology says it's innately there, but we would say because it's in sync with reality, it's innately there and can only ever grow. It's limitless, you know. Yeah, but it's good to see where the concepts and the frameworks are different, and then we can get a better appreciation for both. You know, it's not one versus the other. I think this is where it's been so exciting with the Dalai Lama, with the Mind and Life conferences, of really having that exchange with Western scientists of the mind and even physics and so forth. And, you know, sort of having that dialogue in relation to a Buddhist perspective as well.
Western psychology needs to be that way because it's the right teaching for the right context.
Yeah.
Or if you haven't received any kind of Dharma teachings, maybe you can't, if there's not any more that you can take in, you can only go to.
Well, yeah, you've got, well, I guess Western psychology puts it in a framework that people can understand, you know. Well, we'd say the Dharma does that too, but how many people turn up to a Dharma center, you know, or are likely to, versus how many people turn up to psychologists? I heard that there's a great long waiting list, right? Yeah, yeah, oh, very much so, right? Yeah, so the second part of this is mindfulness is positively correlated with increased clarity of feelings, attention to feelings, and lower distraction. That's what we're talking about. So again, rather than the ADHD mind. So we need this combination of concentration and mindfulness to stay focused on the object, and a sense of non-forgetfulness, just as an intellectual intelligence, rather than intellectual intelligence, I think I'd say conceptual mind, or yeah. So it's using cognitive intelligence, I think it's better, is manifested through reading and learning. And we would say listening, meditating, reflecting, so forth. We would add that in. Emotional intelligence can be fostered through mindfully attending to current emotional states. So this is, he's saying in a non-Dharma context exactly what the Buddha would say, really, isn't it? So we need both the cognitive intelligence and, you know, bringing that together, bringing that conceptual learning together with experience because of reflecting on our emotional states and so forth, to develop insight, and through insight develop more clarity. develop being more in sync with reality and being able to harness that positive energy of our minds. So there's one experiment in the US, mindfulness experiment with people in prison. It's a terrible joke. They were a captive audience. I'm sorry. I just can't help it. Anyway, so there were people on short-term sentences. So from 6 months to 18 months. And I guess taking people on short-term sentences meant you could, you know, maybe they've only had funding for so long to be able to map people over that period of time, but they were. And so one group, the control group, had treatment as usual. So these were people who had history of addiction, whether it be drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or whatever, yeah, mainly those three. And so they tracked them pre-sentencing, oh no, not pre-sentencing, they had to know whether they were sentenced, like at the beginning. And one group had the treatment as usual, which was all the therapies and all the group work and so forth that they had. And then this other group had treatment as usual plus mindfulness, right, for that period of time. And then they tracked them 6 to 12 months afterwards. And not only had their using of whatever substance declined, if not stopped altogether, but also they had developed the capacity of emotional regulation. So you can only do that if you know what's going on, you know. And so a reduction in anger, a reduction in violence, and a development of hope and pro-social behavior. Instead of being the sort of person that will land you in prison because you've been all, you know, looking after yourself, but now this sense of benevolence, this sense of altruism develops. So it's quite profound out of mindfulness, right? How powerful that can be. As a practice. And so here we're talking about it not really so much as a deep meditation practice, but how we engage with absolutely everything all the time mindfully. Okay, so next one, concentration. So we said we need to combine these two. Concentration, so the single pointed concentration that dwells one pointedly on for a sustained period of time on a single object. So here we're really talking about, in our meditation practice, the basis for developing serenity and increasing wisdom. So serenity, we would say that calm abiding, when we look at the 9 levels of calm abiding, of increasing periods, sustained periods of being able to focus and pay attention. And that in itself is quite fascinating. You know, William James at the end of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, said that humans' capacity to pay attention, not to pay attention, to concentrate is about 3 seconds. Right? We could say the untrained mind. So if you're watching your breath and it's more than 3 seconds, congratulations, you're above average already. So you can pat yourself on the back. But it's interesting, in the 1980s, I think it was, or is it 70s? Actually, it was 1970s. And I was involved in theatre and so forth at that time. And one of my friends who developed this quite successful puppet show, which was like a visual extravaganza. It wasn't like, you know, string puppets going along like this. It was just a visual extravaganza. And he would introduce every 1 to 3 minutes a new visual image, completely different. And it was so engaging, you know, this whole thing. Now it's like the movies, you've got to have it every nanosecond, right, to be completely engaged. because he said, you know, people after 3 minutes forget it, you know, their mind's gone somewhere else. So he was being a bit more generous, but it was very effective. I don't remember the show, I have vague images of the show, but I do remember it was so visually impacting, you know. And anyway, so in the 1920s at Harvard, they studied, you know, students. We're talking Harvard students. So they've managed to get to Harvard. So they've had an ability of concentrating in their studies. And what was their capacity to stay in sustained concentration? 7 seconds. It's not very long, is it? It's not very long. So here we're talking about being able, the capacity of the mind to be able to, if well trained, sustain that for hours, you know, or even in the end for as long as you want. But at the beginning, you know, we say, okay, what's stage 1? Up to a minute. So that you can see how already in comparison to those, it's quite profound. So when we think we're not making progress, think again. Progress, we're thinking again. We're already above average if we can stay focused for a minute. Now, object.
Wow, not much hope for teachers.
I know, poor old teachers, you know, most of the time they're disciplinarians, isn't it? I don't know. Have things changed in schools?
Because I can remember we would, you know, when I was giving lectures and things, and 20 minutes, let's say.
20 minutes?
Focus on a topic
Yeah.
for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then if you want to go on longer, okay, but you would have lost the audience.
Yeah.
Well, Susan had something to add there.
Susan?
Oh, no, I thought it was 25 minutes, the average concentration.
20, 25 minutes average
Student
concentration.
span.
Yeah. 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 Which is interesting because often our, you know, meditation sessions are, you know, it says good 25 minutes, 24, 25 minutes, good time. It doesn't mean your mind's focused all that time, but you're putting the effort in for that period of time. And then when you get good at that, you add a few more, 3 more minutes, and get better at it. Okay. So concentration also for increasing wisdom. So to be able to use, you know, analysis, we learn all the reasoning and so forth, all the logic, all the points, you know, so for example, with the Lam Rim or whatever, you know, points of analysis. So we can look at a topic from all different angles, different perspectives. And so for that, we need to have focused attention, right? So that marries in with wisdom. We can have many objects of wisdom. Wisdom being understanding, intelligence, and the function to discriminate precisely. You know, everything in Buddhism is so exact, precisely with analysis, the qualities in detail, you know, whatever object, its qualities in detail, its faults or characteristics. So if we took faults, we might look at like the disadvantages of anger or jealousy or pride or so forth. Or we might look at the qualities in terms of the benefits of patience or the experience of joy. You know, we can look at from many different angles. The object held by mindfulness. So here in our meditation, we're imbuing our mind. So imbuing our mind, say, with loving kindness or so forth, and reflecting on the qualities of that. And to keep in mind that the merits that we accumulate, the virtue that we accumulate from that wisdom never deteriorates. So while we say a moment of anger can destroy all our past merits, we're talking about the merits of the method side, right? So all of the past compassion and generosity and all of that. But in terms of wisdom, that never declines. It might get very clouded over and covered over with a lot of confusion, but it never declines. That's good news. And so when you have this wisdom, you know, focused on the object, held by mindfulness, again, that idea of being held by mindfulness. I like in the Bodhisattva vows, you know, those of us who've taken Bodhisattva vows, and the translation we're using here where it says, I take hold with my mind the perfect state of a Buddha. I love that. It's like I'm holding that, holding on to that with my mind, and it's a sense of total absorption, right? So like this, you know, when you hold with that mindfulness, this wisdom mind cuts through indecision and doubt. So it's a good question to have. How does my wisdom experience, or my focus on wisdom, or my analysis, debate, so forth, allow me to cut through any doubts, any indecisiveness? It's a good question to ask ourselves. For example, so when we talk about doubts, the indecision is really one of those doubts. So we talk about doubt tending towards truth. Well, I don't understand karma, but I think I don't understand it. Of course, Buddha said only a Buddha fully understands it, but I will tend towards taking it, positing it as a law of cause and effect, you know, to whatever level. And we could have doubt tending away, which says, karma, what are you on about? Doesn't matter. Whatever you do doesn't matter, has no consequences, right? So, and then we have what we say two-pointed doubt, or I call it sitting on the fence. That's that mind of indecisiveness. What's the danger of indecisiveness? You don't do anything. You just sort of sit on the fence, right? So you're not going either one way or the other. You're just sort of like, we say maybe complacency creeps in, or at least that's the danger. So, you know, we can have doubts. Can I develop compassion? One of my friends, her mother told her many, many years ago she didn't have any compassion. And now her mother's seen her develop on her spiritual path and has had to revise that in the light of the fact anyway, because she sees it, you know, she sees the compassion oozing out of her daughter. But it's as Charles Darwin said, we're all hardwired for compassion. But maybe she wasn't tapping into it at that point, you know, maybe it was just a bit covered up. So can I develop, you know, is liberation possible? Is it possible to have a cessation of all these ongoing blah, blah thoughts and negative self-talk and disturbing emotions? Is it really, you know, when you're in the midst of it, are you having a doubt that says, is it possible to be free of all that? Right? So it's an investigation. And through that investigation, we develop more and more wisdom. And yes, we can debate that. Debate helps, you know. So in the context of the Lam Rim, the path to enlightenment, we learn all these different topics, death and impermanence, so forth, appreciating oppression, sharing, rebirth, death and impermanence, karma. We go on and we look at all the points to analyze and analyze them freshly each time. Otherwise, we're just sort of going over and not developing fresh new ideas about that. In other words, making it really a sense of our experience. Okay, so that's the object ascertaining mental factors. Okay.
What was 5?
Wisdom. So then we'll start finally on the virtuous mental factors on this basis of these general mental factors. This is a quote from His Holiness and Venerable Thubten Chokyi from the Foundation of Buddhist Thought. The 11 virtuous mental factors. So first of all, we have to say it's presented as 11. Don't think that there's only 11 positive qualities of the mind. There's many, many, many. But I guess we can see, it gives us a summation to see how the mind functions in terms of our virtuous positive states of mind. So the 11 virtuous mental factors cause the omnipresent ones, the object ascertaining ones, the ones we just looked at, and variable mental factors to take on a virtuous aspect. So the variable mental factors we're not going to go into in any detail, but the variable ones means they can be either positive or virtuous or non-virtuous. In fact, the object ascertaining ones could as well, but they have a particular function. So the variable ones are sleep, regret, investigation, and precise analysis. So investigation, it sounds like the same thing, but the precise analysis is going much more in detail, right? So for example, sleep can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral, right? So a virtuous sleep, so say you've taken vows and you refresh your vows, or you've just done your Vajrasattva practice that night before you go to bed and you feel very pure, and then you can go to sleep with a positive state of mind. And while you're asleep, say, you know, with a positive state of mind, then you're accumulating all that, however many hours you're asleep, of virtue. Pretty cool, huh? This guy I was talking about in prison who brought his whole wing along because he was the first one I visited, and I told him about the Vajrasattva practice, which, by the way, we have a session tomorrow afternoon, 1 to 5. If you want to familiarize with, refamiliarize, do some more purification practice. Anyway, I told him about that, and he thought that was the coolest news, that if he did that before he went to sleep, he wasn't, you know, for those 8 hours or whatever he was asleep, he wasn't harming anyone. So to have a concept when you're in prison that, oh, actually, I'm not a bad person 100% of the time, because I often feel like that. And so to cut through that self-image. So he thought this was the best news ever. So pretty cool, huh? So I like that. So sleep could be also non-virtuous, couldn't it? I guess if you were going to sleep and thinking, right, tomorrow I'm going to get back at that boss for blah, 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 or whatever. It's always the boss, isn't it? The boss gets the rap all the time. Anyway, so that would be a non-virtuous sleep, and probably quite restless and non-relaxing as well. Or it could be neutral. You could be just, oh, I'm tired, go to sleep. You know, so it can be any one of those. So these can all be, the regret one is regretting doing something virtuous would be a negative regret. When we do the 4 opponent powers, the regret is for something unskillful that we've done, something that potentially is going to, even just the thought is going to lead to negative actions and speech and consequences and a whole karmic fallout and so forth. So that regret is virtue. So it can be either. So
Can I just ask about sleep? Sorry, again.
Yes, sleep.
PhD is on sleep.
Oh,
Again, on dysfunctional sleep beliefs, actually. So how?
do you read? Have you? I'm sure you have Ariana Huffington's book on something about sleep. It's a whole sort of history of attitudes to sleep, human attitudes to sleep. Anyway,
I read an article that was interesting because it talked about biphasic sleep that was more common in the past.
Yes, when people would get up and just, yeah, she talks about that. And it, like, if you can't sleep through the night, it was just usual not to, and just get up and play or do whatever, and then just go back to bed. They're very fascinating.
And so this kind of plays into that, this whole obsession with, I have to sleep for 8 hours, otherwise I'm going to have the whole worry and anxiety cycle. People can't sleep because of that. And I look particularly at people that they sleep really poorly, but they don't worry about their sleep.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to have better health outcomes than people that worry about their sleep, but there's really objectively nothing wrong with their sleep.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about this virtuous and non-virtuous, whether if I'm lying there and I'm engaging in these dysfunctional sleep beliefs, like the worry, the anxiety, oh, I can't sleep for 8 hours, I'm waking up again.
Yeah, that would,
Is that non-virtuous?
yeah, that
Yeah.
would be very debilitating, very disturbing to the mind. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Sleep Revolution, I think it's called. Arianna Huffington. And she wrote that because she had her own experience of slight tangent, own experience of you know, when she was editor of the Huffington Post, and she had all these back-to-back interviews. She was burning the candle at both ends, she said. And then she had her early morning breakfast or pre-breakfast interview on the radio, and then went back to her office. Next minute, she woke up on the floor with a cracked jaw and blood everywhere. She'd collapsed, presumably from exhaustion. And lead, you know, the opposite attitude of that sleep, you know, sleep deprivation being something that's a virtue, I think. Yeah, so she was, yeah, anyway, she therefore investigated it all. So you might find some usefulness in that. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. So, all right. So the virtuous mental factors, and here's the key difference, is they bring peace to oneself and others. Peace to oneself and others. So we just have to check up, you know, if our state of mind is bringing us peace or not, and whether we label it one of these 11 or something else. What is that, you know? So each of the 11 is an antidote to a particular affliction. So here we have a very precise and direct investigation, you know, to get the right direct antidote, so that we have a direct application in our practice, you know, to get the precise antidote to be effective. So it's got to be the right dose, the right time, the right frequency, and, you know, the exact opposite mind. So this is why we study all these different mental factors, to make sure we're using the right one to oppose whichever one's disturbing our sleep or causing us problems and so forth. So the key is this state of mind causing me peace or not? So virtuous mental factors bring happiness and peace, which is what we want for ourselves, but just look at the world, you know, that so much unhappiness, dissatisfaction, anger, conflict. We can see what sorts of states of mind are propelling that, you know, what makes news headlines every day. I love there's a section on the news feed where it says good news. And you go, oh God, I'll scroll down to the good news, the good news stories. Yeah. So, you know, we need to check up our experience when we do engage in any virtuous actions and see what our state of mind is, you know. So it's propelled by virtue, propelled by goodness. So this is a very mundane example I'll use. So my doctors have been encouraging me to do more walking, looking for walking buddies. And when
You can borrow my dog.
borrow your dog, I'd love to borrow a dog. That would even be extra. See, it feels good, right? With a dog in tow. They've got the feel good feelings generally, I think. Anyway, so now what I'm doing is when I go for a walk, I notice the sense of well-being as a result. because I have to encourage myself to do it. So it's good to notice these things, notice a sense of well-being as a result of what you do. And that, you know, acts as a sense of encouragement. So here we check up. They're based on correct understanding of reality and can be greatly enhanced because of having a valid foundation, because they're in sync with reality. In other words, they are, you know, innate. They are limitless. We talk about the 4 immeasurable thoughts. We're not just 4, loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and joy, but more and more, all our positive states of mind. The only thing that limits their capacity is ourselves. So they just, the more we engage with it, the more we're, I got this sense of well-being. Constructive or positive, virtuous mental factors produce a sense of well-being. Well-being and contentment for yourself and for others. So it's a key to physical and mental health, right? And when we notice when this happened, it's what we want more of, isn't it? I mean, we're all gravitating towards more sense of well-being. When I occasionally, don't very often do this, but look at those magazines, you know, all the benefits of this, and it's all the same. It's all the same. I mean, there's one sort of set of things to do, and it just gets written about again and again and again. But maybe it needs to be written about again and again to remind us. So they're a valid way of engaging with each other, engaging with the world. And not just because, you know, Buddha said so or someone else said so, but because it's in sync. And from our own experience, we know that it's in sync with reality, with truth. And it gives us a sense of connection with others. And those of us, indeed, in the Mahayana refuge, and even having taken Bodhisattva vows, you know, we have this job of L-plate Bodhisattvas of enhancing that sense of connection, a sense of attraction, a sense of harmony, which comes from these constructive, virtuous states of mind. So I was just thinking of one example. Sharon Salzberg is a US quite famous meditation teacher of very long standing, particularly one of her books, Loving Kindness. And she's, so she tells a story about one of her students who had come along to, it was a weekend retreat, non-residential, Loving Kindness. So, so she'd been to the first day and she was waiting for the train on the second day to go for the second day. And another train coming along and a guy got off. Well, a lot of people got off, but this guy came up to her and said, you might think this is a weird request, but you look like someone who's really kind. Can you pray for me today? I've got a really important meeting. So she'd done one day of loving kindness meditation and he picked up on those vibes, right? And just randomly, I mean, how many people do that randomly, go up to somebody and say, would you just pray for me today? I've got a really important meeting going on. He picked the right person. So that energy that it's putting out there, that's a harmonious, peaceful, kind, loving, is a result of enhancing all these virtuous factors. All right, so we'll start unpacking them. Maybe I'll just do one, maybe. So the first one, faith, is a joyful state of mind that arises when we consider the Buddha and his teachings, the law of karma and so forth. So clearly we're putting this in a Buddhist context, but this is fascinating that the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, approximately, at different time, different culture, different place, different people, different country, you know. And yet here we are 21st century Australia, just wanting to, getting a sense of joy to hear about the teachings, try and put it in practice, learn more, apply it, and so forth. So this faith that starts off, first of all, by we first check it out, and we have this admiring faith. Even people who don't know what Buddha's about see a Buddha statue and, you know, like, it feels good. They get the feel-good factor, like that guy on the platform. They get the feel-good factor. It reminds them of something positive, virtuous. But then we take it further into aspiring to be like that. So we talked about the factor of aspiration, that then cultivating this faith of conviction, having checked it out, as a basis of our desire to cultivate those virtuous qualities. Because if I want to achieve that, this is what I need to do. And to strengthen that, to strengthen the desire, to strengthen our capacity to develop those positive qualities. Why? Because it feels good. And the more we do it, the more good it feels. In fact, another term for liberation, you know, the state of cessation, is definite goodness. Interesting, right? The state of definite goodness. So it feels good and we want more of it and we want to feel more good. So it's a mind confident in the validity of the teachings of the Buddha because we've checked it out, not just blind faith. It's not that, as the Buddha said, don't just take it on board because I said so. You check up in your experience. So this faith arises from intelligently engaging with the teacher. So we do have to analyze, debate, develop clarity, insight, and practices, the mind that practices, generating certainty regarding their validity, because it's only from our personal experience, putting it into practice in our personal experience, that we gain that sense of certainty and conviction, right? It's true, right? It produces a joyous state of mind free from turmoil. So turmoil in the sense of confusion, like, you know, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? Or as my friend I met in the Philippines, you know, when they were having landslides and volcanic eruption and flood, and she's like, what has God got against us? I don't think God created all these environmental imbalances in the world. But that sense of confusion, because it gives us a clarity. It's the basis for generating aspiration to develop more and more positive qualities, constructive qualities, and enhancing those virtues that we've already generated. We say that in our dedication prayers, you know, may the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow, the mind wanting, aspiring to become a Buddha. And may that born, in other words, that's already present and manifest, not decline, because it can decline if we let our, you know, habitual negative states of mind take over. It's a slippery slope. And so may that continue to grow and grow and grow, to keep us, you know, developing on our spiritual path. Okay. All right. So I might just leave it there for this morning. Unless any comments, last comments, questions.
Just that comment about, you know, bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Good things happen to bad people. And I was talking with somebody and about this very thing, about why bad things happen to good people.
Right.
And they wanted to know what I felt. So I started to talk about, you know, karma and so on.
Yeah.
As an explanation, and it all makes sense to me. And they said, oh yeah, but I don't believe in rebirth.
Yes. Yes.
And so the whole argument collapsed.
Yeah,
Like,
it's true. we have to, when we're talking with people who don't share the same beliefs as us, if we know them, find skillful ways of talking about the same thing without mentioning the same thing. And it's very difficult if you're going to talk about karma and consequences, but we can talk about, you know, it just in the terms of this life, can't we? Seeing if I rub people up the wrong way, they're going to react in a certain way. You know, everything has consequences. So then we can just use examples in this life, which is what we do to try and understand karma anyway, because we can't see what's happening in future lives. We can't see what happened in past lives. So we do use examples like that. Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise, you know, you lose your foundation for, but that's okay. You tried something out. I mean, I've tried many things out that I thought would for certain going to work, that didn't. And you just go, okay, well, that didn't work. Anybody else?
That approach will work for older people, but it wouldn't work for children.
Maybe. Depends on the child and it depends on the older person.
They've not had much of a chance to create anything that we would think of as living karma in general. Like babies who get raped, you know, or used in that sort of way. It's very hard to see karma in that unless you're looking at previous lives.
Yeah, that's true. But I still think that if people don't have that view, they don't see it like that. Yeah, Bo.
I did personalize that. Well, it's, you know, the karma of something like that happening is a karma of humanity, of culture, of shared karma. And, you know, if you look at how long rape, for example, has been going on back through history and the perpetuation of it, rather than saying it's that specific individual who's separate from everyone else and has their own own causation and the whole sequence of events associated with them. If you just take that out of the equation, then it becomes, you know, a sense of also looking to the future and why you should change behaviours. If you're empathetic towards future generations or other sentient beings or animals, or then what are the repercussions of your actions going to be in this moment, rippling out into other time? So then you don't need a belief in reincarnation.
Yeah, so so we can, this discussion is sort of showing us that we look at things from different angles and different perspectives, and then we learn skillful means and ways to be able to conceptualize things for ourselves, make understanding of things for ourselves, but then take that more confidently into interacting with others, because we're all interdependent. So yeah, it's really good. It's good, healthy to have those discussions and, you know, gain different perspectives and share them. Thank you so much. So we'll dedicate all the virtues from this morning, page 17. Gewadi no do da la ma san ye no gyu ne dro wa chi kyang ma lu de ye sa la go pa sho jan cho sen cho grim po she ma ke pa nam ge gu chi ge wa nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pe wa shu. The long life prayers for our lamas, start page 19, we'll do in English. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Page 22. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjanath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Okay, thanks, everyone.